Why didn't God and Jesus immediately abolish slavery, especially for non-Jewish slaves? It's a question that comes up a lot, and the answer may surprise you. Stay with me as we dive deep into this important issue. Let's start with some context. Throughout ancient history, slavery was a common and deeply ingrained practice. It wasn't based on race like we often think of today. It was driven by war, debt, and survival. Non-Jewish slaves were often prisoners of war or people trying to escape poverty. Now, the system wasn't ideal, but in those days, slavery was deeply woven into society. If it had been abolished instantly, chaos would have followed, especially for the non-Jewish slaves who had no other safety net. So why didn't God step in and end it immediately? God didn't endorse slavery. He worked within that flawed system to protect people. In Leviticus chapter 25, verses 44 to 46, we see that non-Jewish slaves could be kept for life, but that doesn't mean God approved of brutal treatment. In fact, God gave rules to protect slaves. In Exodus chapter 21, verses 20 to 27, God said if a master injured a slave, that slave had to be set free. This was a big deal for the time. It was about limiting cruelty and humanizing the system. But why didn't God just abolish slavery? Abolishing slavery overnight would have caused societal collapse. Slaves, particularly non-Jewish ones, were part of the workforce. They helped maintain economies and provide basic needs in society. If God had removed this system immediately, it would have created chaos. Instead, he chose a gradual process, introducing laws that protected people while allowing the society to survive. And then came Jesus. Jesus didn't ignore slavery. He approached it from a higher perspective. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus said he came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. His death on the cross fulfilled the Old Testament laws, including those on slavery. He didn't call for an immediate end to the institution because his mission was spiritual, freeing people from the deeper bondage of sin. So why didn't Jesus just call for the end of slavery? His goal was to change hearts, not just laws. In John chapter 8, verse 36, Jesus says, "If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." His mission was about spiritual freedom, transforming hearts so that over time, societies would change from within. Jesus also flipped the idea of power on its head. In Mark chapter 10, verse 45, he said he came not to be served, but to serve. This new way of thinking, where leaders serve others, began to erode the foundations of slavery. Jesus' death on the cross showed that true greatness comes from service, not from owning others. It was a message that challenged the very core of slavery. After Jesus' death, things began to change. The new covenant he established was built on grace, love, and equality. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, Paul declares that in Christ there is no longer slave or free, all are equal. This message slowly began to transform society. So, why did God and Jesus allow slavery, including for non-Jewish slaves, to continue for a time? The answer is that both were working within the realities of a broken world. Abolishing slavery immediately would have caused more harm than good, especially for those dependent on it for survival. But through laws, Jesus' teachings, and his ultimate sacrifice, God laid the foundation for a new way of life, one that would eventually lead to the end of slavery. God and Jesus didn't abolish slavery overnight. Instead, they planted the seeds of justice, freedom, and equality. Over time, those seeds took root and grew, leading to the abolition of slavery, including the freedom of non-Jewish slaves. Through Jesus' death, a path of transformation began, starting with the heart and ending in a world where love triumphs over oppression. If this helped you see this issue in a new light, don't forget to share and subscribe for more insights into biblical questions. Let's keep learning, growing, and finding truth together.